Welcome to the Fitness Plus Technology Podcast for club owners, operators, and fitness professionals. Each week, host Bryan O'Rourke brings you an expert interview with a global influencer at the crossroads of fitness and technology. You gain the insights, tools, and inspiration you need to stay connected to the pulse for what matters most for your business in the age of exponential technologies.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to the podcast. I am your host, Bryan O'Rourke. It is almost October. And, we took a couple of months off. Not that I was off. I was working, believe me. So the number of podcasts in the last couple of months has diminished, but we have a lineup coming up. So I'm very thankful that you're taking a moment to listen. Listen, before we get into our guest, George Liu, and talk a little bit about what we're going to be speaking about in this interview, I wanted to mention I will be fortunate enough to be keynoting at Fit Nation, the event in Amsterdam. Fantastic event toward the end of October. I think it's October 25th. We'll put some notes in the show notes. I want to thank the team at Virtua Gym, of course, Hugo and others, for the invitation. I love visiting the Netherlands, and I'll have a chance to catch up with a lot of people over in Europe since I was in Munich in Germany last year in November. So I'm looking forward to that. And also, if you can, please make the club industry event, the executive event here coming up October 16th, 17th, in that realm. We'll put a link in the show notes as well. And then I'm fortunate enough to be heading to Portugal for an event with my colleagues over there. And that'll be fantastic in November. So I hope to bump into you if you're listening. And don't forget, you can reach out to me at bryanko'rourke@gmail.com or follow or connect with me on all the networks. If there's anything you'd like to chat about, please let me know. So let's get on with the podcast. George Liu is a very interesting gentleman who's been in the fitness industry for a while now. He has a great, very interesting background as an immigrant. He didn't speak any English up to a few years ago. And now he's running an agency to help micro gyms with marketing and scaling to profitability. We're going to have some links in the show notes about George. He's helped a number of clubs. I really enjoyed our conversation. So without further ado, let's welcome George to the podcast. Welcome, listeners. And as I was telling you in the intro, George is on the line. And George, where are you joining us from? You're on the West Coast today?
Yeah, West Coast in Los Angeles currently.
Yeah, one of our favorite towns there. Thanks for joining me, George. You have such an interesting story about your background and your journey to get in the fitness space. I know our listeners kind of like to learn more about the people we're talking to in the interview. So tell us a little bit about how you got here.
Yeah, it's do we want the long version or the short version?
Well, you tell us what you think is best. We could do short and then move to long, however you'd like to.
Yeah, that's fair. I think the short version of it is so I actually come from a family of immigrants. I was born in Japan, raised in China. I didn't move to the US until I was about 10 years old in the East Coast. You might not be able to tell just from my accent, just my Americanized accent, right? However, growing up was really difficult, and the short version of it was I think everyone that jumps into fitness at one point or another, they share this commonality in which it usually comes from like a place of pain or wanting to change oneself, right? Where they want to improve their body in one way or another. One day I looked in the mirror when I was 18. I just really didn't like who's looking back at me in the mirror. So I decided to do something about it. And a lot of the lower self-esteem, if you will, came from my upbringing, the turbulent childhood, moved from one town to another. But when I was 18, I decided to take control of my body. And as with anything, I started working out with a couple of my friends and initially lifting out of ego. But then next thing I know, for the first time in my life, it took something and I really applied myself for the first time. And I was able to see results from it. And since then, I was hooked. So fast forward 3 weeks, I put on 12 pounds of lean mass on my body. And I was like, holy crap, this is crazy. So up until then, in my life, I had always been an underachiever my entire life. Once I got to college, however, that changed everything around. it was almost like I learned what work ethic meant for the first time. And up until then, my whole life, I lived in a very apathetic way. But once I got off to college, it really piqued my interest in terms of what I had just gone through, and I wanted to learn a whole lot more about nutrition, kinesiology, exercise science, all those things. So when I went to UMass Amherst, which was my school, I built on my own major. I started picking and choosing the things I like to learn the most, which included exercise science, nutrition, also marketing, management, communication, psychology. And I took this whole ball of a major and I meshed into one, in which after college, I decided to use that. My path was very interesting. The short version is I saw an ad and I clicked into it and I ended up hopping on a call and I dropped $6,000. Next thing you know, I'm in this rabbit hole of learning how to provide value from a marketing standpoint to local business owners. And my first thought was, well, if I could help more gym owners, I could help more Georges at the age of 18. That was not exactly happy, right? So next thing I know, 4 years later, here I am. So
That's a
that's my
good
story.
succinct version, George.
Yeah, yeah,
I thought that's great. So,
yeah.
and so you got into marketing now. Tell us a little bit about your firm and how long you've been doing that work.
Yeah, so we started about 4 years ago, and it started from my first ever investment of that $6,000 to learn from this couple that was teaching people how to run their Facebook ad agency to help local business owners. At the time, my brother was actually working at Facebook at the time. He was managing really big book accounts with millions of dollars in ad spend, which included a lot of startups. So I knew Facebook ads worked. So that bought a lot of faith for me to jump into that program. Mm, I bootstrapped it pretty much from the ground up. There was a lot of cold calling early on, just chatting with a lot of gym owners. Initially, earlier on, I remember it was a really tough finding because at the time I didn't have a lot of sales experience or anything like that in regards to business. So, but what I did find was that when I started chatting with gym owners, a commonality I found was that a lot of gym owners had a very negative experience when it comes to marketing. Repeatedly, I would hear people saying that, "Oh, I've spent thousands of dollars," and it led to nothing. It was a very negative experience overall, and I just thought to myself, uh, because that experience of being burned, it seems like it was shared by so many operators in the fitness space, and I committed to myself. I was like, I'm not going to be a person like that. Like I just choose not to be a person like that. Because for me, I'm someone who's less motivated by money, but more so motivated by people and impact. So how I got my start was because I was also starting out 4 years ago. Our very first client that I cold called, we still have a relationship to this day. Um, Pretty much my quote unquote pitch was I was like, hey, listen, don't pay me anything. I just want to help you. Once I can get you results, then you can pay me. So that was how we got our start. And the short version of after each gym I worked with, I got much deeper of an experience in terms of how to run ads that works for gym owners. And we traditionally serve brick and mortar mom and pop shops, so the smaller guys, right? Because we also noticed that they care a whole lot more. The first ever experience that I had working with a gym owner, I actually decided to sign up for a lot more than just the marketing responsibility because I realized I need to learn more and understand more in order to provide more value and help more. Because with me at the time, I had no experience coming out of college. So what I ended up doing was I actually, after I started working with him on the marketing front, I took on the responsibilities of making calls for him. So not only did I generate the leads, I made calls for him during the day, and I would actually set appointments for me in the evening. And I would actually it's crazy. I was living in New York City, crashed on my sister's couch at the time, fresh grad out of college. So during the days, I would call these leads to book them for an in-person appointment, and then come around 3:30 p.m., I would jump out of my sister's apartment into the train station, take a train to the South Ferry station, and then hop on a boat to Staten Island, which is where the gym was based out of, and bike all the way to the gym as he was opening it up for me to actually gain the sales experience in those evenings for like 5-ish weeks. So that was how I got my start. It was definitely an adventurous one. By the end of the first 4 months, I had learned more than I could have ever imagined, more so from any other kind of classes I've taken at school or anything like that. But for me, I just started building a very deep foundation from there on. So that was how I got my start. It's very
Yeah.
interesting.
And
Yeah.
what out of that experience, because we all, if any, as you kind of alluded to, anyone that's gone through really earning their chops, as they'd say,
Yeah.
has gone through this, right? What was something that you learned from that you didn't expect from that experience when it comes to selling and marketing in the gym space?
Great question. I think for me, it was more than I can put into words, but the long and short of it was that what I learned in the process, as far as best practice, is that oftentimes marketing and sales is it's really just being human and caring about the other person that you're connecting with, right? It's like, because traditionally, I think before I ever gained any deep sales experience, I often thought about sales as being a pitch. It's like, hey, let me do this for you. Like, let me tell you how great we are. But I think from the entire experience, what I've learned is, well, first of all, consumer behavior in terms of what they care about, it's just similar to what human beings care about. We care about who we want to become, right? What our goals are. So from the marketing standpoint, after working with the first ever client, we actually jumped into, so we were implementing a brand new process at the time. And for me, I was able to see firsthand in terms of the kind of changes that could provide such dramatic results on the marketing front, right? With one initiative, we were able to go from a cost per lead of $22 to a cost per lead of $1, right? So what kind of changes need to happen for results to be 22 times better? So those are all things that I have learned from a marketing standpoint. As well as a sales standpoint as well, because once I started having these conversations, I remember I was really nervous at the beginning when I was having the sales conversations. But after each rep that I went through, I realized the more questions that I asked, the more I actually made it about the other person to understand what their health and fitness goals are. Hey, what's important to you? Where are you currently? If you're looking to lose weight, like, how much do you weigh currently, right? And where are you looking to get to? And what are all those different things that you try, right? When you make it more about the prospect, they actually appreciate the process a whole lot more. And at the end, they actually come to you and they're like, yes, I want to do this. So those are all different pieces that I have learned. Um, from the market standpoint, I also what I realized is that most gyms actually don't have a very defined process, whether it's lead generation, of getting people to raise their hand, whether it's getting people in the door, whether it's actually having that conversation with them. Um, all those things I learned.
So, with respect to that, in regard to that,
Mhm,
'cause I do want to come back to your marketing observations in a minute, but let's
mhm,
talk about the gym industry in general right now. Um,
mhm,
and some of the stuff that I've seen you write, and I agree with it. And having clubs in the international business and working with a lot of clubs, as I know, is a big thing, and there are a lot of big things. One is, cost of acquisition of a new member, retaining existing clients, and then, the lifetime value of the client. The spaces, high degree of attrition and
yes.
turnover, cost of leads have been going up tremendously. I mean, what do
Yep.
you what do you think are big opportunities and challenges in marketing for gyms right now?
Mm, Pretty much all those things that you mentioned. Right, because the gyms that we serve, they're brick and mortar mom and pop shop gyms, right? And oftentimes, what I've seen in terms of operators, they come from a place of just wanting to uplift their community. Wanting to more people to undergo a change that probably very similar to one that they have gone through. Um, well, first things first is when it comes to challenges, marketing in the fitness industry is just having those numbers and awareness of those numbers in the first place, right? The terms, even the terminology, right? Cost of acquisition, churn, lifetime value, retention, those being in the forefront of an operator's mind, I think that in itself is very important, right? Because oftentimes, I think a lot of gym owners, when they open up the space, they come from maybe like a technical background of being a trainer, and they jump into that role, not knowing that that requires a mindset shift of jumping into learning what does being an operator mean, right? But then the natural next set of challenges is with what I have seen, Facebook and Instagram has been the platform that has been, this could be definitely biased, one of the most effective platforms just for reaching in front of a community, right? Because we know that with every $10 or $15 you spend, you can get 1,000 people near your area, right? So the old way of doing things was essentially handing out maybe flyers or just shaking hands. But especially with COVID being an incident that has heavily impacted the fitness industry, now we need more than ever like a way to just digitally get in front of other people, right? So if you're not actively getting in front of people, how are people expecting to know you, right? And the challenges with operating a platform like that is that it's constantly changing, it's ever evolving, right? What has worked maybe 3 months ago might not work now. So being in the forefront of those changes and having awareness of what's going on in the market and how people are reacting in real time is very helpful. But a challenge in terms of what I have seen is that most gyms, they will tell you they can't afford to market. They
Yeah.
don't have a marketing budget. However, my belief is that most gyms can afford not to market, right? um, I think there are studies that have shown that, especially during a recessionary period, a lot of businesses, when they get choked up, is when they decide to cut their spending across the board, which includes marketing and sales cost. However, if marketing and sales costs are done properly, they're not a cost, but rather they're an investment, right? So each dollar you be putting into into marketing and sales, it should generate $6 to $10. So if you were to cut costs on that, then the business would be in a really difficult position, right? So I think the challenges overall is then how do we market and get people in the door and signed up profitably? And that's what we have seen. If a Facebook advertisers really know what they're doing, and this actually goes across the board beyond just gyms, but I've actually seen that in chiropractors, dentists, auto dealership less so, but a lot of other local business owners as well. It usually will cost anywhere between $50 to $150 to just acquire a customer
Right.
through paid media. So then the challenge for gyms is, well, if it costs, let's say, $150 to get someone signed up, and that's without even paying for the help of an expert that's helping you do that, right? That's if the operator is really strong in marketing. Um, but then if they're charging, let's say like $100 for like group fitness, or maybe like $80, that's really tough because then you essentially it's very hard for you to be profitable from day one, right? Um, so when we talk to a lot of gym owners, when they say, "Yeah, I can't afford to market," one of the challenges is pricing, right? Because for gyms, I think across time it has just become a race to the bottom, right? So oftentimes when gyms are built, operators jump into a specific community. They're looking around their area. They're like, "What is that gym priced at?" Okay, $100, $110. Got it. Well, let me be somewhere in the middle. But what they don't know is most gyms, unfortunately, are struggling financially. You know,
Oh, they are.
um,
They
yeah,
are. And as you pointed out earlier, George, they don't even know the baseline metrics. Like when you go,
no,
what is your acquisition cost? They really don't know. Or what
no,
is your true lifetime value of member? And not just the average, because we want to look at your median with some standard deviation, because a lot of clubs, they'll have 20% of the people generating 80% of the revenue, and then they'll have another 80% that aren't. So you're right, because a lot of folks don't know those numbers at all.
100%. Yeah, yeah.
And that's for big companies too, right? I mean, it's surprisingly, right? So
Mhm.
we've seen with the right, tell me about this and getting more into what you're doing to help these businesses figure out the best path forward. In the direct to consumer fitness space, particularly as of
Mhm.
late, there are a lot of companies out there that are losing their butts because their cost of acquisition has gone up to be well in excess of what their gross margin is on their product they're selling. So when
Mhm.
you're to your point, so when you're dealing with these kind of clients, how do you help them figure that out?
Mm. Good question. If you were to, well, it's kind of like someone who's starting out in health and fitness for the first time, right? It's like if someone's trying to get in shape for the very first time, they've never worked out before. They don't know their macros. They don't know the difference between macro and micros. They don't understand calories. If you were to tell them, "Hey, well, I need you to study this and just learn all of this, it's a tough ask, right? So for us, like if we were to go the approach of saying, hey, gym owners, well, we need you to know these numbers from day one, it, it's unless there's trust built, and or they're very strong operators or have a very strong desire to learn, doesn't usually go over very well. So for us, the very first thing we do actually to help our partners, so our clients we call partners, because we like to refer to as a partnership because we're performance based. The very first thing is we just deliver results first and first, so that they see that, oh, this actually works, right? So because once they're so the very first thing we actually help them out with is most gyms they don't have money, however, and they'll say I don't have money to market. However, we need to be able to help them make money from day one for them to buy into this belief that this will work, so that they take the initiative to start understanding their numbers and understand the value and importance of that. So what we do is very early on, as a marketing consulting agency, marketing partner, if you will, the very first step is we help them install a profitable acquisition system from day one. And there are a lot of things that goes into that, right? Because it's going back to what we were talking about before. If the cost of acquisition is, let's say, $100 or $150, if a gym is charging $100, then you're breaking even. That's without even paying for a marketing expert, right? However, if you could package something that you can sell for more than that, then the numbers change, right? So the very first thing we actually help them package, because traditionally a lot of gyms, their marketing is probably along the lines of like, "Hey, we're open. Come check us out." um, However, what we do is we actually help them package together, let's say like a 12-week program, if you will, like an entry level offer for someone to ease into fitness, or let's say someone who has been in it but has hit a roadblock to bust through and build momentum. So we started calling it. We actually came up with this back in 2020 during COVID, because one of the things I realized was the cost is only going to increase over time. So if we don't have a way for our operators to make money from day one, it's not going to be long lasting. So for us, we actually built a 12-week, what we call a lifestyle transformation program that we help our partners package. So the offer is the first piece, right? Because if you're able to put something together and throw an immense amount of value in it, whether it's adding a nutritional component or accountability component or so on and so forth, you can charge for it. And if you're able to build out, let's say, like, and something we have tested out, a 12-week program, and be able to charge $1,200, even for the average everyday Joe, right? Because what it comes down to is they're not buying workouts for $1,200, not buying a plan. What they're buying is really change. You know, after a conversation, you're able to get a person to understand, well, in order for them to actually have the body that they want to have and have the health that they want to have, they need to change, right? And that takes a very strong sales process. So we package together an offer that we can actually get our partners to sell at $1,200. Then all of a sudden, the math changes, because if it's costing you $100 to $150 from paying into Facebook and Instagram to get a person in and signed up, and then all of a sudden you're charging $1,200, boom, the math completely changes. So that way they can afford to invest with Facebook and Instagram to be able to get more people in the door and have this be a positive cycle. So for us, we package the offer, we push the ads out in a way that will work like that pretty much every single time. Then the next variable component is how do we get them in the door and how do we get them signed up, right? So a lot of operators, when they jump into the owning a gym, the process of owning a gym, not everyone has had sales experience, right? Or maybe like cold calling experience, or that grit or the mindset around that, right? Because it can be really difficult. So for us, we actually provide a lot of guidance around that front as well, and we partner up with a software to make the process as ideally as simple and as easy as possible. However, even that though, sales is still sales, so it's still can feel hard for someone who's not used to that, right? So that's essentially what we do with lead generation, lead nurturing to get people in the door, and then we teach them a sales process that works, so that by the end of that process, especially after the first sign up, that's usually when I'm most excited, right? When one of our partners shoot a message like, "Paid in full, $1,200," and usually like it really breaks their mind, right? Because we talk to operators all the time that operate in, let's say, like around like the $8,000 to $10,000 top line revenue per month, and we've had experiences of taking, let's say, like a gym owner who's doing $5,500 a month and just bleeding $1,500 a month for months on end, and they were on the verge of closing down the doors, within 3 weeks, signing up $15,000. Those kind of things like completely shatters their beliefs in terms of what's possible. And then at that point, then they even have the bandwidth and like the like, ah, wow, I can breathe moment for them to learn more about like numbers and putting everything together, because then they believe it's possible. So that's essentially what we do.
Yeah. And, it's so funny that you bring that up because having dealt with these kind of issues as well in business, it is a lot of times people get, they think that marketing is just about ads and spending money when that's just a component of it. If you don't have a
Yes.
business model that fits hand in glove with that, it's just not going to work, right? It's not going to work. And there's only so much that general marketing agencies can do, because then you're getting into really how you operate the business. And nowadays, would you say that in general, because I believe this, but I'd love to hear your thoughts, to decouple conversations of marketing from real business model profitability operations, it's impossible to do that, right? You have to know the math.
Yeah. Yes. I agree. I mean, they both go so closely hand in hand, right? It's like, I think, for me, this is the first business I've ever started, and for me, like, I just noticed how much I have had to learn, right? It all started 4 years ago from a bright-eyed kid, just right out of college, just wanting to learn what providing value means, to understanding and learning all these fundamentals of business. And like you said, it's marketing is so closely tied to it. The way I understand business now is that to understand the growth of a business, essentially those two numbers couldn't be more important, right? Cost of acquisition and lifetime value. Because if you just have those two numbers, you can know exactly how fast you want to grow a business, whether the business is growing, whether it's stalling. Um, so it's so closely tied to marketing. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and it all feeds also what's sustainable, because if your business model isn't set up in the right way, because it's not just acquiring the customer and doing that part, it's how do you maximize that when you get them in the door? Like, what do you do next?
Yes.
You do it
Yes.
next, because that's more opportunity. A lot of people will focus simply on the front end and they don't even think about that, right?
Yes. With lifetime value and retention,
Yeah.
I think, uh, because the shiny stuff is also on the front end, right? So the shiny stuff is like marketing, sales, get more people in. But actually, within every single business, and I'm a firm believer that it costs you much less to keep a customer
Right.
and provide more value for the customer than it is to acquire, because that's the most expensive part of a business. Um, so I think any operator, if they chose to put more attention towards how do we provide a better experience, how do we offer more to service, let's say maybe the 20% of the customers that would want to buy more, right? Um, those can't be understated, and I think that's actually oftentimes, and going down to the basics, making sure that the margins are there, gross margins, and making sure that you're running a business that's profitable and you're paying yourself. Those are the really important stuff, right? However, earlier on, I think people have a tendency to just think like, I need more members, I need more members, I need more members, right? But
Yeah,
in reality,
what
it's like,
kind of members and how much are they paying you? And these kind of things become
yes,
more important, right? Um,
yes,
but I think a lot of folks, when they're in a difficult, and I've had a lot of businesses, and I know you have a lot of experience in that. When you're trying to make payroll and you're sweating it,
yep,
you kind of lose objectivity. You get tunnel vision, right?
yes,
You're panicking, right?
yep, yeah. And I think that's I think unfortunately that's where a lot of operators, in terms of what I've seen in the fitness industry, where they're at, making decisions from that place of not having security, not having stability or consistency or predictability, right? It's like, and I think usually when a person is making a decision from that place, it's more so emotional, it's more so reactive, and it doesn't lead to long-term progress, right?
Yeah, it's
Um,
very, very
yeah,
challenging in that regard. And
yeah.
today for small businesses that are any business that's in the fitness space, um, when it comes to positioning your brand or adding value, because it's a very important subject that you bring up that I'm a real believer in.
Mhm.
I find a lot of gym owners, operators, they have a problem thinking about, well, how do I message that? How do I create content that's going to be seen as valuable in a digital way, those kind of things.
Mm.
What are your thoughts on that, and what are you helping your clients figure out in that realm?
Mm. So content creation and also positioning, right? That's such a great question because that's something that has been on my mind recently. This is going to sound very interesting, or maybe different. However, for me, I think around the topic of branding and positioning, which is less on my wheelhouse. However, the way I understand it is that branding and positioning, branding especially, it's how a person feels about your brand, right? So when you think of, let's say, McDonald's, how do you feel about it, or Nike, or Adidas, right? It's like, how do you feel about the brand? I think the challenge actually for most fitness-based operators when they're spending way too much time thinking about the brand in the form of what color should this be
Right,
or
right.
what's the website, right? It's like those are the things that like a person wouldn't spend more than 2 seconds, like a consumer wouldn't spend more than 2 seconds be like, wow, that color is phenomenal, right? It's like because people don't care about that. They care more about how this brand is able to positively impact them. And the reality is, I think most fitness um, well, most especially brick and mortar business owners or even just apply for business owners in general, maybe during the earlier stages, the challenge is that not enough people know about them, right? Because if a gym owner was to walk around the street within the 7 mile radius of their gym or 3 mile radius, and they were to wave down 100 people, like, hey, have you heard of my gym? Chances are they haven't heard of it, right? So my philosophy around branding, especially as a small business, right, as a small business owner or local business owner, is that branding comes down to how you show up, right? It comes down to how you show up for the people that you're caring for, the people that you're serving. How do you interact with them? How do you engage with them? Do you actually care about them, right? And what is that process like? So, like for a person to become a customer of yours? In other words, sales process, right? How do you get to know a person? How do you coach them through? I think in the most fundamental way, as far as branding and positioning, oftentimes it comes down to the person that's spearheading that operation in terms of how well they're able to communicate with their prospects.
Right.
Because if you're able to create those opportunities at the beginning, and just let's say if you're chatting with ideally each person you chat with, they'll have a positive association now of your brand, right? So the next time someone waved them down, they're like, hey, have you heard of that gym? Now they have a positive association to that. um, I think in a perfect world, as business owners, we want to be able to just create content. And I'm the same way. We want to be able to create content, just push it out there, and just hope everyone watches everything that we push out. But people have the attention span of a goldfish nowadays, right? So I'm a big believer in terms of for local business owners, as well as a business that are run on, let's say, on a smaller side, which us included, that usually, let's say, aren't getting that much impression. Right? It's like what one of my buddies had to share with me, who runs a YouTube coaching business. They do, um, I think they've done as high as like 1.6 mil a month. At the advertising budget they spend, they get enough eyeballs on their ads and enough people searching their website that for them it now makes sense for them to even flesh out a very clean website, very well built out, and all the messaging and the branding and the positioning in that website because they're getting so many eyeballs on it now, right? But that's because they're spending so much and they're at an operation that's much bigger. But earlier on, I would say the name of the game around positioning, especially, is just comes down to how how strong are you able to get in sales and how deeply do you understand sales? And I think a lot of maybe fitness professionals or business owners earlier on may think negatively of the word sales, right? Because we all have that negative connotation of that. But I think sales is so in short, if especially a local gym owner wants to um, position themselves well or brand themselves well, it actually comes down to how good are you and how good can you get at sales. And what sales really is how deeply can you understand and care for the other person's problems and challenges, and how well can you map a solution that you offer to their problems and challenges. Right?
That's right.
And the better you get at that, the more positive people will feel about you. Right. So
Yeah. And then
that's how I think of it.
and that
Yeah.
influences how you communicate everything. It's I like to think of it as a common term of
Yes.
intentionality. Yeah,
Yes.
because yeah, in a world today, people have such amazing bullshit meters because
Yeah.
everyone's trying to con you into giving you their money, And,
Yes.
and the litmus test of whether or not you believe their bullshit or not is how much you believe their intention versus, what is their intention? Is there an intention more nefarious, or is it more helpful? Do you
Yes.
really care? Or are you just trying to get in my wallet, right?
100%. Yeah. Because we're all very intuitive. The human beings are very intuitive. I think we don't give as much credit as we deserve when it comes to our intuition, right? Because like if you're having a conversation with another prospect, with a prospect, and all you care about is closing the other person and selling the other person, they how much do they care about you closing them?
Yes.
Not at all. They don't. They can't. They can't care less about whether you close them or not. What they care about is being helped, though. You know, if they're encountering any problems or challenges, if they're hitting roadblocks, if they're losing motivation, if they're always just falling off track, or if there's if they place a lot of guilt onto themselves whenever they fall track, right? And if they can't stick to a plan, or so on and so forth, or if they don't have motivation, right? That's what they care about. So if
Yeah.
you're able to make it about that, everything changes.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's hard to do though. It's
Yeah.
hard because you can't fake it. You
No.
really can't fake it. And people, they pick up on that pretty quick, right?
100%. Yes.
Pick up pretty- So in your agency right now, and given these dynamics, if it comes to someone listening to this and thinking about marketing, George,
Mhm.
what are some key things that you would say? Like what's the advice? You kind of covered a little bit of this, but if you break it down simple terms, hey, this is how you need to start, this is how you need to think about it. What would that be?
Mm. If someone is looking to dive into marketing, it's pretty much very closely, um, it's very similar to what you were mentioning before, right? Marketing is just a piece of the pie, right? I think when it comes to a person thinking about marketing, what they really want is acquisition, which how I understand is marketing plus sales, right? So if someone's really thinking about marketing, they have to understand that it's a whole package. From their perspective, I'd say for a local business owner, uh, this may sound controversial, but this is my earnest belief, and it's that if you're thinking about marketing, especially if you're a local business owner that hasn't received any funding and you're tight on cash, the marketing that you do, it has to be able to have, well, it has to have track record of being able to make you more money than you're able to spend, right? Because like chances are you might not have like 500K sitting in the bank just waiting for people to sign up 6 months down the line for you to make the money back, right? So the three key pieces that needs to be part of your decision-making process in terms of if you want this to be successful is lead generation, the first piece. How do you generate leads? How do you get a customer to raise their hand to say, hey, I have a challenge. What is that thing that you offer? What is this thing? Right? Where are you guys located? How much is the price? So lead generation, the first piece. The second piece is if you own a brick and mortar, or if you're an online business, it's especially if you're brick and mortar, it's more so, okay, so a person has opted in, right? Let's say they put in their name, email, phone number. What do you do with that person? Right? Like I think you'd be surprised at how many gyms out there that doesn't have a very strong lead nurturing process, right? It's like ideally, as soon as they opt in, they come in, they get a text right off the bat, right? To introduce yourself and actually give them guidance on, okay, what to do next, right? So the lead nurturing process, what is the process you have to actually get them in the door, right? To have them turn into, let's say, physical appointments coming in through the door. Then what kind of process do you have to ensure a very high show rate? So you don't waste that person's time, you don't waste your time at scale. Then the sales process, once that person comes in, how do you have a choreographed process? Choreographed does not mean robotic, but rather as structured. However, it's still human, in which you're able to engage with this person as if it's the very first time you're meeting them, because it is. It's like just because you've had the conversation in the past with another person doesn't mean this person is going to be the same exact person. Every person is different. Every human being is unique, right? So how do you have a strong human-based sales process that's able to deeply understand everything about the prospect in terms of where they are, where they want to go, their problems and challenges along the way, what they have tried, and then how do you present them with a solution, right? So lead generation, lead nurturing, sales process, these three, they're a bundle package. right? It's similar to how a friend of mine that's actually our COO. He came up with a good example this past weekend when I was grabbing coffee with him. It's the equivalent. If a gym owner just wants marketing, it's equivalent of them just wanting they want coffee. They just want coffee beans. It's like, okay, well, once you have the coffee beans, you gotta do something about it, right?
That's a good
Um,
analogy.
yeah. So because the next step is like, okay, well, how do you grind the coffee, and then how do you make the coffee? I'm no coffee connoisseur, but lead nurturing the sales process is critical. Without those two pieces, no matter what kind of marketing is done, it won't work.
Yeah, absolutely
They
true.
just bleed money. Yeah.
It's so funny because I needed to get my car windows tinted. Um, and so in the area that I live, I recently, I of course researched on Yelp, looked at Google reviews, found the two highest rated in my area, and then proceeded. It was a weekend night, late. You can see how exciting my life is. And so I went online and I filled out a lead form for one. It wanted all this
Mhm,
information about make of my car, everything, which I submitted. And I
mhm.
didn't hear anything back. There wasn't even an automated email reply. There was no nurturing whatsoever.
Mm,
I did it again and nothing. So then I went to
mm.
the next tinting place 3 or 4
Yeah.
days later. I sent it to
Yeah.
them, nothing. So then I was driving down the road after an appointment, and I saw the last place that I'd sent you filled out the form. So I pulled in. I went inside and found someone, and I said, listen, I'd like to get my windows tinted. To your point. So we arranged it, got it done, and when I went to pick up the car, they did a great job. The owner was there, and I paid him and thanked him and said, "Oh, by the way, I want to let you know because I own a lot of businesses, and I don't know if you know this or not, but I filled out your form twice, and no one ever contacted me." And the
Right.
guy's like, "I don't pay any attention to that." That's
Oh,
real out
man.
there, people. That's real.
Yeah. No, because as you were mentioning that, like, I think back to I think ever since I started helping gym owners, I've been more mindful in terms of my experiences that I have with small business owners, right? It's like I I think it would be incredibly effective if a owner made it don't make it hard for your customers to buy from you, right? It's like if someone's opting like submitting a form, it's like yeah, like please just call them, just shoot them a text, um, build that relationship. Um, yeah, that's all I can say.
Yeah, it's just very, very interesting. So yeah, systematic approach to how you're doing lead gen and nurturing and converting. It's all part of a natural process that you have to design. It's not
Yes.
by happen chance and it can't be random. You have to do it in
No.
a consistent way. And then you learn from that, right? And you can tweak it and improve it as you go.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's really important. Well, George,
Mhm.
since you're an entrepreneur, you've done it, you've had a great and very interesting background in your journey here where you're serving so many clubs with your expertise in marketing and business. Can you give the listeners a couple of pearls of wisdom regarding what you would be thinking about right now for today and the future and competing successfully in the fitness space?
Mm. The number one thing I would say is price. Because I think that's something that we talked about earlier on, right? It's like, what are the different challenges that the club is normally experiencing? I truly believe that most fitness professionals and also most gym owners, they're severely underpriced. What I mean by that is, you can actually search this up on Zen Planner. They actually ran a study where they had, I think it was 400 to 500 club owners. They self-reported their data in terms of their numbers. And what they found was that it cost anywhere between a club, a gym, this is for group fitness, $85 to $95 a month to service a member. So
Yes.
it costs 85 to 95 a month to service a member. And then when they actually took stock of all the self-reported data, the bottom performers in terms of health of the business, that's probably around the price they were charging. Because if you're charging 85 to $95 a month and it costs you 85 to $95 a month, you're choosing to be a nonprofit, right? So and for a business, that's not healthy. Um, Plus, oftentimes, gym owners in those situations, they don't take into account staff, right? It's like if they're a one-man show or one-woman show, it's like they haven't taken into account, okay, well, I need to pay someone else to do this. Otherwise, I'm creating a prison for myself,
Right.
like where I'm just locked in here 60 hours, 70 hours a week. And I have, instead of having my previous income, maybe as a trainer, now I have overhead, so price needs to be taken into account. And if a person feels a little bit anxious or worried or doubtful about raising the prices, don't raise prices for your existing customers. Just start mark up your prices for new customers coming in, right? That's the first advice that I would give. And then secondly, learn the skill of packaging an offer. So what we have seen in real time is that when I first started in the marketing space, I remember it was very early on, and one of the things we did, we pushed out free week passes. Right, this is very common amongst a lot of clubs or a lot of gyms. We were pushing out free week classes, but then we actually swapped over to a new way of doing things, which is offering front-end programs, right? So whether it's 30-day, 60-day, or 90-day program, whatever it may be, right? It's like if you would just offer it, because you got to think about it from the end consumer standpoint, someone who has never gotten into shape before in the past, it's a very daunting experience, right? It can be scary, right? So the difference between them committing to, let's say, like a free week program in which then they sign up for membership versus, oh, well, here's seems like a beginner program or whatever program that's personalized over the course of 12 weeks for me to get my body in shape. That's much more enticing, and we've actually seen that play out in terms of how consumers react to that. As far as clicking on it, opting in, it's if you have a front end program, like for us, I can just share openly. We teach our partners on how to offer a 12-week lifestyle transformation, right? To help them transform their body and also their mind, right, in terms of how they think about fitness and about their goals. And what we have seen is that it slices our cost per lead by 2x. So if it costs $20 to get a lead for a free week, it's boom, it cuts it off to like $10, right? And this is just not, it's not like our theory for us. This is just based on data that we have seen, right? So it's just what consumers want. So the two biggest pieces of advice is, number one, please charge more for yourself, the people you're looking to serve, because reality is, like, if you go under the people you're serving, you're not going to be serving them much longer. Right. And make sure you pay yourself in that process so it's sustainable. And then the second piece is, if you're able to learn how to package an offer that works and then promote it in front of community, and put more attention towards marketing and sales, it'll serve you so much just by learning the skill of what we call high ticket sales, right? Being able to have a sit down consultative approach with someone, and learn the skill of actually getting a customer to pay you $1,200. That changes everything. That absolutely changes everything, because all of a sudden, the moment for us in our community, a gym owner is able to have the first experience of collecting $1,200 from one 30 or 45-minute conversation, and also get a higher commitment and higher valued member, right? It changes everything in terms of how they think about their business. Yeah.
George, that's very good advice. I couldn't agree more. I hope the listeners take this into account as they continue to operate their businesses. We're going to have, of course, in the show notes, listeners, links to all of George's stuff, including his marketing company. And in the intro, I explained a little more detail about his background. I'm so grateful to have you spend time with us and our listeners today. And thanks for sharing your wisdom, my friend.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Yeah, the pleasure's all mine.
Hello, listeners. This is Bryan O'Rourke, and thanks so much for listening to the Fitness Plus Technology Podcast. The podcast is made possible by the Fitness Industry Technology Council, a consortium of global brands working together to enhance the adoption of technologies in the fitness space. Our company, Videri Ventures, which is invested in Vertimax, Montezuma, Gold's Gym, Houston, Texas, and Fitness 24/7 Thailand, also underwrites the podcast, along with our service companies, Integris Advisors, Moon Mission Media, and others. Please feel free to share this podcast with your colleagues. And if I can be of any assistance to you, don't hesitate to reach out, bryanko'rourke@gmail.com, or find me on any of the major social networks. Have a great day, and thanks for listening.